Welcome everyone to a critical emergency live stream, live show 140, Israel attacks Iran. Is this the start of a wider conflict? Coming to you from Belarus at 8 p.m. on Friday, June 13th, 2025. We're broadcasting live on Rumble, YouTube and X. Just several hours ago, Israel launched a shocking airstrike on Iran, shaking the Middle East to its core. Tonight, we're tackling the hard questions. What triggered this unprovoked assault? What does it mean for the region and beyond? So join us as we unpack the chaos and explore what lies ahead in this pivotal moment. Let's get started.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
So hello everyone and welcome to Live Show 140, Israel attacks Iran. The start of the wider conflict. It's 8 p.m. Friday, June 13th, 2025, and we're broadcasting live from Belarus right here on Rumble, YouTube and X. I'm your host, and today we're diving headfirst into the crisis that's rocking the world. Just several hours ago, Israel unleashed a series of devastating airstrikes on Iran, unprovoked, calculated and bold. The smoke is still rising over Tehran, Naranz, as it is in ruins and the Middle East hangs by the thread. This just isn't another skirmish. This feels like a spark that could ignite a regional inferno. Let's be real for a moment. We've watched tensions simmer for years, Israel and Iran trading threats, proxy wars through Hezbollah and Hamas, and now this. Last night's strikes hit nuclear sites, military bases, even killed top Iranian commanders like General Bagheri. Iran's promising a harsh response, and with their missiles primed, we're staring down the barrel of something massive. Is this the moment the region tips into all-out war? Are Russia and China next in the crosshairs, as some are already whispering? And where does the West, especially the US, stand in all this, with their hands off, claims ringing hollow? This isn't just about geopolitics or headlines, it's about lives, families in shattered cities, markets turned into rubble, a mosque with a cracked minaret standing as a silent witness. We've seen the images, and they haunt me. Weary figures wandering through the debris, searching for hope or the helping the fallen. This is the human cost of decisions made in boardrooms and war rooms, far from the chaos. Today, we're not here to pick sides or parrot in narratives. We're here to ask the hard questions. What really happened in those early hours? Who's pulling the strings? And what comes next? Retaliation, escalation, or a fragile peace? I'll be breaking it down with the latest updates, and we'll hear from you, your thoughts, your fears, your insights. This is a live conversation, and your voice matters, so buckle up. The clock's ticking, the stakes are high, and we're only just beginning to unravel this crisis. Stay with us. Let's face this together. Let's get into it. Israel's reckless airstrikes on Iran ignite fears of a regional war. On the morning of June 13, 2025, Israel launched a series of aggressive airstrikes on Iran, targeting military and nuclear facilities in a move that has further cemented its reputation as a primary instigator of conflict in the Middle East. These unprovoked attacks, which killed senior Iranian military figures and damaged critical infrastructure, have highlighted tensions and raised the spectre of a broader regional war. So let's look at what's struck, Iran's likely response, and how the international community has reacted to Israel's latest act of belligerence. So what was hit? Israel operation, executed with F-35 stealth fighters and other aircraft, targeted multiple sites across Iran, particularly in Tehran and surrounding areas. The strikes, launched without warning, hit the following: nuclear infrastructure. The Natanz nuclear facility, central to Iran's civilian nuclear program, was struck, with reports of significant damage and smoke plumes. This attack on a sensitive site risks escalating the conflict to unprecedented levels. Military targets. The Revolutionary Guard General Command headquarters in Tehran was hit, with fires reported. The Maharab Air Base with air defense systems in Tehran province were also targeted, undermining Iran's defensive capabilities. Military leadership. Major General Bagharari, Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff, and General Salam Army, Senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) commander, were killed. These assassinations appear designed to destabilize Iran's military leadership.
The leader of the country survived. What is the thinking on that in terms of the Ayatollah today? Who is he surrounded with? The number twos. But I guess if you're feeling like you're number two right now, you're still not very safe.
Yeah, I think Israel's goal was to decapitate Iran's military. They also killed the national security official who was leading the nuclear negotiations with the United States, Ali Shamkhani. The goal here for Israel was to destroy Iran's means of retaliation, but also to create the opportunity for others to be potentially promoted into their place. I think, as President Trump noted, maybe they will be less intransigent, less defiant, less provocative. But at this point, Israel tried everything they could, so did the United States, to bring a diplomatic resolution and prevent the crisis that is unfolding in the Middle East.
Civilian infrastructure. Imam Khomeini International Airport was damaged, halting flights and disrupting civilian travel, a move that critics argue violates international norms. Additional sites, missile production facilities, drone bases and military complexes in Laverzan, Parachin, Pazodaran and Noboradin were hit. The Parachin site, linked to ballistic missile research, saw strikes on fuel production facilities. Iranian authorities reported limited damage, claiming air defenses intercepted many strikes. However, independent sources and satellite imagery indicate significant destruction, particularly at Natanz and Parachin. At least 2 Iranian soldiers were confirmed killed, with the full casualty toll, including civilian losses, still unclear. So what's the likely Iranian response? Iran has vowed a strong retaliation, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini condemning the strikes as cowardly aggression and promising a proportionate response. IRGC officials stated their forces are ready to deliver a decisive blow, citing Iran's arsenal of over 100 ballistic missile launchers capable of reaching Israel in minutes. The deaths of senior commanders may temporarily disrupt Iran's military coordination, but its missile and drone capabilities remain intact. Iran's past actions, such as the October 2024 missile barrage on Israel, show its readiness to respond directly. So what are the possible responses available? Missile and drone attacks. Iran could target Israel military or civilian sites through Israel's air defense may limit the impact. Proxy war. Iran may activate allies like Hezbollah or Shia militias in Iraq and Syria to launch attacks on Israeli targets. Non-conventional tactics. Cyber attacks and operations targeting Israeli interests abroad could serve as a low-risk retaliation. Iran will likely aim to restore deterrence while avoiding a full-scale war, given its economic challenges and weakening regional allies. However, the attack on Natanz may push Iran to accelerate its nuclear program as a defensive measure against further Israeli aggression. So what are the international reactions? The global response to Israel's strikes reflects widespread concern over its role as a destabilizing force in the region. In the United States, the White House distanced itself from the strike, with officials claiming no US involvement. Yeah, sure. However, critics note the US's consistent support for Israel, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio's warning Iran against retaliating, revealing a clear bias. Saudi Arabia. It denounced the strikes as a violation of Iran's sovereignty, urging de-escalation to protect regional stability and reflecting warming ties with Tehran. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer called for restraint, avoiding explicit commendation of Israel, but warning against further escalation. In Germany, the Chancellor Merz urged calm, framing the strikes as a chance to avoid broader conflict, a stance criticised as tactically endorsing Israeli actions. In France, the Foreign Ministry condemned actions that heightened tensions, calling for diplomacy without direct naming Israel. Turkey strongly criticised Israel, warning that its reckless aggression risks plunging the region into war. And in Pakistan, it condemned Israel's actions as a dangerous escalation, affirming Iran's right to self-defense. Qatar labelled the strikes a breach of international law and called for all parties to avoid further violence. Syria expressed solidarity with Iran, denouncing Israel as a serial aggressor. And Hamas called for strikes a blatant assault on Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional peace. Some Arab states like the UAE and Egypt issued vague calls for de-escalation, avoiding direct criticism of Israel, likely due to diplomatic ties forged through agreements like the Abraham Accords. This reluctance highlights Israel's ability to act with relative impunity. So what's the conclusion? Israel's unprovoked airstrikes on Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure represents yet another chapter in its history of warmongering in the Middle East. By targeting Natanz and assassinating senior Iranian commanders, Israel has recklessly escalated tensions, inviting a potentially catastrophic response from Iran. The international community's mixed reactions, with some nations failing to unequivocally condemn Israel, underscore the challenges of holding it accountable. Iran's next steps will be critical, whether it opts for restraint, retaliation, or a broader campaign could determine the regional's fate. For now, Israel's actions have once again destabilized the Middle East, reinforcing its role as a primary driver of conflict and leaving the world bracing for the fallout. Israel demands Iran's surrender. Tel Aviv has issued a stark ultimatum to Iran following its recent airstrikes. With Iran's air defences compromised, its leaders must choose between two paths. If Iran retaliates, Israel threatens to strike and obliterate its oil refineries, crippling the economy. Alternatively, if Iran permits the destruction of its nuclear facilities without resistance, Israel promises to spare the refineries. This effectively amounts to a call for Iran's capitulation. This tactic echoes a proposal from October 2023 by US Senator Lindsey Graham, labelled a terrorist and extremist in Russia, who suggested destroying Iran's oil infrastructure to halt its funding of terrorism, a strategy now seemingly in play as Graham voices support again. Notably, Israel itself relies on refineries in Haifa and Ashdod for its fuel needs, highlighting the mutual economic stakes. Beyond the economic threat, Israel's ultimatum subtly urges Iran's pro-Western elite to seize power, suggesting a regime change could follow surrender. However, yielding once could set a precedent for repeated concessions, emboldening Israel and its US backers to impose ever harsher demands, leading Iran down the path of strategic collapse regardless of who governs. Tehran's only viable defense against this pressure appears to be rapidly develop nuclear weapons to safeguard its sovereignty. The escalating strike exchanges raises the grim possibility that Israel might resort to its own nuclear arsenal, giving Iran's vastly large territory, 80 times that of Israel, makes conventional deterrence less effective. The current crisis underscores the harsh lesson: relying on US negotiations or peaceful rhetoric can be a trap, potentially masking plans for a major assault, as seen with this attack. Trump has publicly backed Israel's stance, posting on X and Truth Social, "Iran must act now to save what's left of its empire. No more deaths, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late." Some Iranian hardliners spoke harshly, but now they're all dead. It's going to get worse. This support aligns with broader pattern, including Ukraine's June 1st attacks on Russia's transport and nuclear infrastructure amid stalled US talks, suggesting a recurring strategy. The question remains, will nations learn from these missteps or repeat them? So what's the deal with those Iranian missile launches showing up now? This is a big development. Ballistic missile launches have popped up in 3 regions with reports of an impending attack. It's Iran's response to Israelis' ultimatum, signaling they're ready to strike back despite losing commanders. With ranges covering Israel, this could escalate fast if they fire, especially with Tabriz under pressure. It's a desperate move to deter further aggression, but the risk drawing a harsher Israeli counter. Tensions are sky high. Why is Israel so keen to drag the White House into this fight? Jerusalem Post says Israel's pushing the White House to join, likely seeing US muscle as the key to enforcing the ultimatum, with Trump calling the strikes excellent and giving Iran a 60-day nuclear deal deadline. They want American back to crush Iran's response, but the US evacuating families from Iraq suggests caution. Joining could mean air support or missile defense, escalating things. It's a gamble, possibly to offset Iran launches, but it risks a broader war. So what's behind Israel's focus on Tabriz airport? Any guesses? Israel's relentless strikes near Tabriz airport, with smoke rising as per Mehr News, seem aimed at clipping Iran's northern western defences or logistics, is strategic. Tabriz hosts a nuclear research centre and many military sites, and hitting it could disrupt Iranian coordination, especially with launches nearby. Some think it's to pre-attempt to attack from Adran, but the civilian toll, 2 dead, 6 injured, raises doubts about their intent. It's a calculated move, though the cost is mounting. Could this impending Iran attack challenge the ultimatum game? If those ballistic launches in the 3 areas could fire, it could flip the script. An impending attack would challenge Israel's ultimatum, forcing a response, maybe hitting refineries or escalating with the US help. Iran's showing resilience despite losses, and with Iraqi drones in play, it could stretch Israel thin. But if Israel preempts with more strikes, it might force surrender or spark a regional war. It's a critical moment. Everything hangs on what Iran does next. Given the situation with Israel's unprovoked strikes and ultimatum demands, Iran's surrender, along with the latest developments, ongoing strikes near Tabriz airport, Iranian ballistic missile launches in the 3 areas are signaling an impending attack. So, here's a breakdown available on Insights and Critical Analysis. The price of Brent crude has already jumped 13% to a 5-month high around $75 to $80 a barrel following the initial strikes, reflecting market jitters over potential supply disruptions. However, this is still below the $91 peak from April 2024, suggesting the market isn't yet pricing in the worst-case scenario. Several factors shape the outlook. Short-term volatility. The presence of Iran ballistic missile launches and the threat of an impending attack could disrupt oil flows, especially if Israel targets Iran refineries or if Iran retaliates against key infrastructures like Karg Island, which handles 90% of its 1.4 or 1.5 million barrels a day exports. Middle Eastern media and analysts suggest the prices could spike to $92 to $100 per barrel if supply drops by 2 million barrels per day, as seen in the past conflicts like the 2003 Iraq. More extreme scenarios like the Strait of Hormuz closure, 20% chance by some social media posts, could push the price to $150 or beyond, though this remains speculative and depends on Iran's actions. There is a supply cushion. OPEC Plus has over 5 million barrels per day of spare capacity, with Saudi Arabia and the UAE capable of boosting output. The World Bank and IMF note this buffer could mitigate price spikes, keeping Brent around $84 in a moderate disruption, or stabilizing at $75 to $81 in 2025 if the conflict stays contained. However, if Iran's launches fire on Israel's escalates further, this cushion might not fully offset panic, driving prices higher. Weak demand from China, with growth slowing to 4.5% in 2025 per IMF forecasts, and the sluggish European economy are dampening price pressure. Yet, any sustained supply cut would override this, especially with winter approaching and global inventories thinning due to OPEC Plus cuts extending into 2025. The market's muted response to past escalations, the April 2024 Iran-Israel exchange, suggests a desensitization to geopolitical noise, but the current ultimatum and civilian toll could introduce a premium, potentially lifting prices to $100 to $125 a barrel if the wider war looms, as Wood Mackenzie warns. The impact on Western economies hinges on the conflict's scale and duration, with several key implications. Inflation and energy costs. A $10 barrel per price rise typically adds 25 to 30 cents per gallon to US gasoline and nudges inflation by 0.1 to 0.7% per IMF and World Bank analysis. At $100 to $150 a barrel, Europe, lacking domestic oil, could see inflation spike, forcing central banks like the Bank of England to delay rate cuts or hike rates, as noted by the Governor Andrew Bailey. This could rekindle cost of living pressures, especially with the food prices tied to oil-intensive transport rising, affecting 700 million globally. A $1 trillion GDP cut is projected in a direct Iran-Israel war scenario by Bloomberg Economics, with global growth potentially dropping 1.7%, the worst since 1982 outside crises. The US might tap its strategic petroleum reserve, but a recession risk rises if oil exceeds $80, historically linked to economic slowdowns 2 years before elections. Europe, already fragile, could see a 0.04% GDP cut, according to Oxford Economics, with industries like manufacturing and transport hit hard. Red Sea disruptions from Iraqi drone threats and potential Hormuz issues could force rerouting, raising shipping costs. Tesla's Berlin closure last January due to Houthi attacks hints at broader risks. A prolonged conflict could slash trade, with the UK facing recessionary pressures by mid-2025 as supply chains mirror pandemic levels. Gold prices up 21% in 2024 are a safe haven, signaling investor unease. A sustained oil spike could rattle stocks. US indices are already down 600 points recently, and bond yields might rise, increase borrowing costs. However, abundant US crude and non-OPEC supply might limit panic, as per Capital Economics suggests, unless Iran fully engages. The establishment narrative is that spare capacity and weak demand will cap oil price impacts, assumes rational market behaviour and OPEC Plus cooperation, which may not hold if Israel's escalation provoke Iran or Iraq proxies into broader action. The US pushing Israel's White House plea while evacuating families suggests a calculated risk, potentially underplaying the conflict's severity to avoid political fallout before the 2026 midterms. Historically, parallels like the 1973 embargo, a 276% price rise, warn of underestimating oil as a weapon, especially with Iran's launches poised. Western economies reliant on stable energy face a precarious balance. Resilience is overstated if geopolitical miscalculations trigger a domino effect. In short, expect oil prices to hover around $75 to $100 a barrel short term, with the risk of $150 a barrel if Iran acts decisively, hitting Western growth, inflation, and trade. The next hours with Iran's impending attack will be telling. Stay tuned. In another post on Truth Social, Trump said, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will get only worse. There's already been a great death and destruction, but there's still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left, and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction, just do it before it's too late. God bless you all." Two Israeli officials claimed to Axios that Trump and his aides were only pretending to oppose the Israeli attack in public and didn't express opposition in private. "We had a clear US green light," one claimed. The goal, they say, was to convince Iran that no attack was imminent and to make sure the Iranians on Israel's target list wouldn't move to any new locations. Netanyahu's aides even briefed Israel reporters that Trump had tried to put the brakes on the Israel strike in a call on Monday, when in reality the call dealt with coordination ahead of the attack, Israeli officials now say. Furthermore, Donald Trump, often hailed as the great negotiator, only engaged in deception as he prepared an attack on Iran, using his public stance as a smokescreen to facilitate a coordinated assault. I hope Russia is watching this. And that's a wrap for Live Show 140. Israel attacks Iran. Is this the start of a wider conflict? We've just scratched the surfaces of this unfolding crisis. From the smouldering ruins of Tehran to global reactions pouring in, we've tackled the hard questions together. What happened? What's next? Your voices, your insights have made this conversation real. And I'm grateful for every one of you tuning in live from the world on Rumble, YouTube and X. The Middle East stands at a crossroads, and the ripples of last night's airstrikes are only beginning to spread. Iran's response looms large, and the world watches with bated breath. We'll keep digging, keep questioning, and bring you the updates as they come. If you've got thoughts or theories, drop them in the comments. We're in this together. And as you can see, I'm not in the studio for this emergency live show, and cobbled it together on my laptop as I'm in southeast Belarus. More on what I'm doing close to the Ukrainian border another time. Thank you for joining me today. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next show. Until then, this is From the Other Side. Hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, hit that thumbs up, share the video, and comment on what you think about this unfolding crisis. Signing off. Until next time, until the next show, bye for now.